Well, anticipation is also building for another big announcement. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis about to make it official that he will run for president as well. NewsNation has learned DeSantis expected to file paperwork declaring his candidacy as early as tomorrow. In a speech on Monday at a religious event, he seemed to hint at the idea.
What I say is, get ready, put on the full armor of God, stand firm for the truth, and don't ever back down. But I can tell you this, I have only begun to fight.
DeSantis and his close-knit team have been known to change things at the last minute, so we'll be flexible as we watch. If and when DeSantis does officially declare, he'll be the 6th GOP candidate to enter the race. Here to talk more about it, Boyd Matheson, Republican strategist, former chief of staff for Senator Mike Lee, and host of Inside Sources on KSL. Boyd, good morning to you. So DeSantis is popular in Florida. I think few will dispute that. But how will that play across the country? Does he have his work cut out for him to win over most Americans?
He does. It's a big bite and a long chew as a presidential campaign. And as he begins that, of course, he's really been doing this Make America Florida kind of campaign as he's gone about and touted the things that he's done in Florida, which is not a bad way to start and introduce yourself to the country. But I think one of the things that you will see is over time, you'll see fewer references to Florida and more just references to his policies or things he enacted in his administration. So demonstrating his ability to govern and his ability to lead. So it's starting out with a big focus on the Sunshine State, but he's got a lot of work to do to get Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and all those early states. And he can't do that on a Florida message alone. He has to make it a little more broad. So you'll see a peak in references to Florida, and then you'll see those start to fade out, and it will become more policy, action, and results driven.
Every voting block is important and will matter come 2024. But what does he need to do to swing the never-Trumpers voting block?
You know, I think for the never-Trumper crowd, I think what Governor DeSantis has to do is really just stick in that lane of, I know how to lead, I know how to govern. I think what that segment of the party is really looking for is stability, someone who's serious. And I think he also has to avoid the temptations to get in the mud and do the big swings as he goes back and forth with the former president. The ability to show restraint there without appearing to be weak. Again, tough line to toe there. But I think that will be part of what that particular group is looking for.
Hard to say, but did DeSantis wait too long to announce, giving the former president too much of a head start?
I don't think so. I think the governor did the right thing. He waited until his legislative session was over, which I think is the right way to lead and the right way to govern. So he finished an important thing for the people of Florida who elected him. Of course, the former president has a big lead right now, but it is so early. It is not about the polls right now. It's about practical, tactical things on the ground in those early voting states, building the operation. That's really the key, raising the money so you can get the message out. So I don't think he waited too long. I think it's actually a pretty good window for the governor.
What do you think will be the biggest challenges he faces based on some of the things he's done in Florida? So the culture wars, the latest with the Disney drama. You've also got the travel advisory as of late. Where will he find the biggest vulnerabilities?
Yeah, I think the test is going to be how he talks about those. People can disagree about his battle with Disney. People can disagree about some of the culture war pieces. It's more how he explains what he did and why he did it and what it will mean to them in their lives. And so even though people may say, well, you shouldn't really poke a big business in a state, or you should be for free markets, it's really about explaining why he did it and then how he would lead as a result of what he learned from that. I think is the real big issue there.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.